1991, the Soviet Union collapsed and each of the oppressed nations took its path of national development. The process did not always turn out to be painless. The upper echelons of the USSR and the KGB did their best to save, if not power, at least their political influence over the territories of the dying empire. Armed conflicts had already flared up in the Caucasus, Transnistria and the Baltic states, though in Ukraine the processes were still proceeding peacefully, democratically. Ukraine was the first of the post-Soviet republics that managed to subdue that part of the Soviet army which was located on our territory at that time, and this enabled us to avoid military confrontation. However, the leaders of the Russian Federation that was recreated on the ruins of the USSR made repeated territorial claims against our country in an open fashion. For example, Putin's political mentor Anatoly Sobchak declared back then that Crimea was ancient Russian land and it should not belong to Ukraine. Later, the result of all these claims was that the Russian parliament issued a resolution by the Supreme Council of the Russian Federation on May 21, 1992. Deputies demanded that Crimea be returned to Russia and that all the ports and bases of the Black Sea Fleet of the former USSR be taken back by Russia. It was proposed that the fleet itself remain under Russia. The president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, didn't want to start a conflict with Ukraine. However, the revanchist forces at the top of the Russian Federation did not resign themselves to this. They still carried out annexation of Crimea a quarter of a century later. Ukraine is still in the process of creating a modern navy. The annexation of Crimea dealt us a very big blow. We lost a significant part of our combat and transport ships due to Russian occupation. In addition, it is typical that even the division of the Black Sea Fleet, after the collapse of the USSR, this distribution was extremely unfair. An attempt took place in 2014 to capture a number of naval ships in Ukraine's Donuslav base, when our ships had to fight their way through the opposition and direct obstruction of Russian naval forces. During the annexation of Crimea, the Russian army captured 51 Ukrainian ships, almost our entire fleet, which was on the peninsula at the time. Only Ukrainian border guards were able to get some of their boats out of there. 15,000 servicemen of the Ukrainian Navy stayed in Crimea and moved themselves into serving the enemy. The infrastructure, secret documentation, codes and passwords were all lost. In fact, only those ships remained in the ownership of Ukraine which were absent from the base in March 2014. These are 9 boats of various tonnage, including the Ukrainian flagship, the Hetman Sahaydachny frigate. Later on, the Russians agreed to return some of the captured Ukrainian ships. However, it meant that if Ukraine agreed to this, it would recognize Crimea as being Russian. That is why our Black Sea Fleet is currently in Russian captivity. But over the years of independence since 1991, Ukraine has suffered great losses, and not just in its military fleet. We inherited a large trading, fishing and tanker fleet from the Soviet Union, but now there are only a few tankers left. We have a bit of a merchant fleet and a small cruiser fleet, but during the period of Ukrainian independence, we have not introduced new ships. Yes, Ukraine received a good inheritance from the Soviet Union, but later on it turned out that the fleet is actually just iron. After all, the Maritime Ministry remained in Russia, and with it all the necessary documentation, from the legal rights to the ships and ending with international agreements on maritime trade. The currency, which was also earned by all Ukrainian ports, remained in Moscow. At the same time, the Russians declared the slogan "Russian goods, Russian ports," so the Ukrainian merchant fleet was left without orders. Russia ensured that independent Ukraine could not break into the international maritime trade market. And now this is being repeated once again. After all, trade is stability, as no one wants to deal with a country where war is taking place.
Для України з'являються деякі нові можливості.
There are some new opportunities for Ukraine. If other countries and ship owners try to avoid maritime trade with Ukraine, then Ukraine can successfully develop its own merchant fleet. And this, by the way, can be a serious step towards developing the country's navy, because there is already an opportunity here to take the steps we need to strengthen naval capabilities, because our traffic volumes are growing.
Морські можливості, тому що в нас зростають обсяги перевезень.
Powerful maritime countries often accompany their warships with merchant caravans in dangerous regions. And international military escorts are on special alert, like for example, off the coast of Somalia, where pirates recently attacked shipping. The Ukrainian flagship, the Hetman Sahaydachny, took part in such watches. But Ukraine now faces a much more modest task in the field of maritime trade security, fighting various kinds of smuggling, including drug trafficking and industrial espionage activities. That's why the Coast Guard may even encounter armed offenders.
Так, ми зараз активно розвиваємо підрозділ спеціального призначення.
We're now actively developing a special purpose unit. This is new equipment to search for objects underwater, new equipment for landing on ships that do not comply with the lawful orders of a border service ship to stop, and relevant professional training for our specialists.
Це і відповідна фахова підготовка наших спеціалістів.
Ukraine has every opportunity of becoming a modern sea power. First and foremost, these are well-located seaports and 3 of the 10 largest European rivers, the Danube, Dnipro, and the Southern Bug. However, in order to turn Ukraine's maritime prospects into reality, considerable capital investment is required, and the necessary funds are beginning to flow into this industry. The sphere of sea transportation was, according to Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman, recognized as a priority in the state program for the development of inland waterway transport for 2014 to 2020. I hosted a large delegation from Iran recently. People want to trade with Ukraine. They want to load grain through our wharves. And we have such an opportunity. It was a very interesting tour. 2 days ago, I received a family of entrepreneurs from China. They were also very interested in our port. At present, water transport accounts for less than 1% of total cargo traffic in Ukraine. And this is despite the fact that transportation by water is much cheaper than, let's say, by rail. However, the Ukrainian merchant fleet was barely 20% of the number of ships we had back in 1991. In fact, the fleet was squandered. The current Ukrainian government is certain that those who are to blame for this should be punished. Just a few days ago, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine opened 2 criminal proceedings in the case of alienation of merchant ships from our Ministry of Infrastructure. So it's possible that a certain number of vessels will be returned into state ownership. Ukraine is now in 43rd place by number of merchant ships sailing under its flag. It has all of 134 boats, and this is all the more insulting because the country's coastal infrastructure is capable of receiving many more ships. Large developed ports remain on the territory controlled by Ukraine, on the continental mainland. These are the ports of Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kherson, but even in the Sea of Azov, take Mariupol, the main port of the Sea of Azov, and Berdansk. At the same time, the ports have a special role to play in the state program. Almost all of them need to be modernized. We need new specialized wharves for the reloading of grain, oil, iron products. Warehouses need to be built. The state program provides for expansion of freight traffic and the arrival of foreign carriers. The latter are able to count money and, seeing the benefits, are ready to come to Ukraine in spite of the ongoing military conflict.
То есть в порт пришли инвесторы. И сегодня вот это инвестиционное...
Investors have come to the port, and the investment program is now being resumed. Huge projects, each of which is worthy of a separate film. And a 110,000-ton grain complex is being built on Voyenny Val, and a new wharf is being constructed on Wharf 7.
На седьмом причале новый комплекс строится и новый причал. Причал 1Z.
Wharf 1Z on Androsovsky Val, a huge granary holding 180,000 tons. The new wharf will have new depths, which will enable ocean-going vessels of the post-Panamax type with a cargo capacity of 70,000 tons to call there. Thanks to investors in the new port, new loading and unloading machines have appeared in the port. The port water area itself is expanding. A new 900-meter-long breakwater is being built. And all this is in one Odessa seaport. The same rapid development can be seen in other sea gates of Ukraine. For example, in Yuzhny port, which is Odessa region, investors from one American company are completing construction of a grain terminal that can handle 5 million tons. Only our positions at the ports of the Sea of Azov have got weaker. The reason is the armed conflict with Russia. But in the Sea of Azov we have a problem. The Kerch Strait is controlled by Russia, and they unfortunately decide which ships to let through. This Kerch bridge will bring considerable losses to the port of Mariupol. After all, huge ocean-going ships simply cannot pass under that bridge. Another area where Russia's negative role is being felt is shipbuilding. Ukrainian plants were largely focused on servicing Russian consumers. For example, the flagship of the Russian Navy, the Moskva missile cruiser, was built and repeatedly repaired at the Mykolaiv shipyard. The Russians also had significant influence over the senior managers who ran shipbuilding plants in Ukraine. So when the Russian-Ukrainian armed conflict began, the work of the shipyards was disturbed. The Mykolaiv shipyard even stopped operating for a while.
Власне, Миколаївський кораблебудівний завод, ну там такі...
The Mykolaiv shipyard. Well, there were rumors that the Russian Federation was creating serious problems for the plant, so that it would not operate. Well, we now need to give serious attention to the development of our own shipbuilding, because there are favorable conditions for developing the marine merchant fleet in Ukraine, like in no country of the Black Sea region.
Морський торгівельний хоча б флот.
But for now, shipbuilding plants receive orders in the main from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. That is, these are military orders. It's almost the first time in the years of the country's independence that the government has begun to allocate budget funds to develop the Navy. For the time being, patrol and artillery boats for the Maritime Border Service.
У нас зараз будується новий катер.
We're building a new boat at present. We're now working on a number of technical projects for boats and ships of various classes. We and our Ukrainian enterprises are working on modernizing ships and boats as they are slowly becoming obsolete. The new boat will be from the UMS 1000 series, which has proved itself very well in service in both the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. The boat will be upgraded to the current conditions of service. Above all, the issue is new weapons. But this is the topic for our next program. In the meantime, remember that each phenomenon has its good and bad sides. It's pro and contra.